Hello guys, would you like to listen to a story? Well, here's another one on my iPad. Little Miss Trouble by Roger Hargreaves. Little Miss Trouble was out in a ride with Mr. Mischief driving through the puddles. One day Mr. Mischief asked if they can splash Mr. Dizzy. Little Miss Trouble decided to be kind, and she had some chocolates for him. But Mr. Dizzy refused because he heard that she wasn't a kind person. So Little Miss Trouble decided to splash him. Not a good idea. Once on their way home, Little Miss Trouble had an idea to do. She thought about making prank presents for Mr. Stamp, Mr.Greedy, and Little Miss Splendid. Even for Mr. Dizzy. They gathered up some boxes and started working together. As the presents were finished, Mr. Mischief went to the telephone to ring Mr. Stamp. "Good morning," said Mr. Stamp, with a scheme on his face. "We have a present for you. Come at once." While they were waiting for Mr. Stamp to come, Little Miss Trouble planned on having some tea. Mr. Mischief sat up. Little Miss Trouble sat on the prank for Mr. Stamp. After they were done, they started drinking their tea. Little Miss Trouble opened the door.
"Do come in, Mr. Stamp,"
said Little Miss Trouble with a scheme on her face. The prank was a big bucket full of water splashing on top of his head. Poor Mr. Stamp had to sit down and dry while they started delivering more presents. Well, poor Mr. Stamp was left alone, sitting up to no good cottage where Little Miss Trouble lived. They were on their way to Mr. Greedy's house to prank Mr. Greedy with another present. Mr. Greedy went to see who was at the door. It was Little Miss Trouble and Mr. Mischief dressed up as the postman. Mr. Mischief gave Mr. Greedy the prank present. The present was a hot pepper tart. Mr. Greedy thought it was too spicy instead of too sweet, and there he went to the fish tank to drink some water to cool away the hotness. From behind the door, Mr. Mischief and Little Miss Trouble laughed out loud. After Mr. Greedy had a very hot breath from eating the hot pepper tart, Little Miss Trouble and Mr. Mischief arrived at Little Miss Splendid's mansion. "We have a present for you," said Little Miss Trouble. The present was a mirror that looked very cringy for Little Miss Splendid. She threw the mirror on the floor and glared at them. From behind the door, Mr. Mischief and Little Miss Trouble laughed with delight.
"Do you think she likes it?" "Oh, yes, she does." "Off we go."
Not surprisingly, Mr. Stamp, Mr. Greedy, and Little Miss Splendid very happy for themselves. Little Miss Trouble and Mr. Mischief kept on going. They went to Mr. Dizzy's house.
"Hello,"
said Little Miss Trouble.
"We have a present for you."
"Oh, my," said Mr. Dizzy. The present was a small pair of shoes. Mr. Dizzy felt very curious about them. Said Mr. Dizzy and tried them on. Little Miss Trouble told him to count to 100 while walking in them, but he didn't fall. After walking in them, his feet wobbled. "These don't seem like a good pair of shoes," said Mr. Dizzy, and then he had an idea. Next morning, Mr. Stamp came along looking as dried as he was before. "I have a present for you, Little Miss Trouble," he said. Little Miss Trouble didn't notice the present, but it was made for Mr. Dizzy, Mr. Greedy, and Little Miss Splendid. Little Miss Trouble found out, and the present is a special hat with honey candies. Miss Trouble was very curious about the new hat, but what she didn't know was that Mr. Dizzy decorated the hat with honey candies. And Little Miss Trouble found a big storm of bees landing on her hat and was terrified of getting stung. So she ran away.
"Ah! Help! 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 There are bees at my hat. I don't like bees."
"Hello, It's me again, Storytime Mania World 4. Did you like my story that I read? Here we are in the end credits. Please click that like button, comment in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next book.